Welcome to Champion Minded, the podcast for those who aim for excellence, not only in the sports arena, but in life. My name is Alistair McCaw, author, speaker, mindset and performance coach, and my goal is to help you unleash your unlimited potential and provide you with the tools to achieve greatness. Are you ready to become champion minded? Then let's do this.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast, or welcome back to it. I'm Alistair McCaw. In this episode, I have someone that has been known as probably the most successful person in sport. She is often called a visionary, a pioneer. In fact, when she was introduced to the great Nelson Mandela, he already knew her. He called her the I Lady. My guest in this episode is Dr. Cheryl Calder, a visual performance specialist. She's from South Africa, and I absolutely loved having her on the episode because we shared some notes. I was brought up in South Africa myself. We competed at more or less the same time. You'll hear in the beginning of our interview, Dr. Sherylle talks about sports in South Africa, the isolation years, which was the apartheid years, the 80s and early 90s. Obviously, the transformation changed in 91, 92 when President Nelson Mandela was released from prison. It's a really, really interesting time. So when you hear things, she'll talk about the Rebel Tour. Rebel Tours, for example, were traveling sports teams that couldn't come to South Africa, and vice versa. As South African athletes, we couldn't go overseas because of the ban, because of the isolation. So, I relate a lot to her story as well, because it was the same for me traveling out of South Africa to Europe to compete. But Dr. Cheryl Calder has worked with some of the best athletes and teams in the world, including Formula One's very own Valtteri Bottas. She's worked with the Springbok rugby team, the All Blacks, the England rugby team together with Eddie Jones, and many, many other top sports teams and athletes. Now, in this incredibly interesting chat with Dr. Calder, we get into how she started as a visual performance coach. She also shares some of her experiences working with some of the best teams and athletes, including Ernie Els, the major golf champion. Also how she approaches teams, how she works with them. Obviously, bringing in something like visual performance coaching is different. A lot of athletes and coaches haven't ever been exposed to it. Also, she discusses her influences along her journey. Dr. Tim Noakes being one of those as well. She talks about visual recognition and visual awareness. Also, to find out a little bit more about Dr. Cheryl Calder, you can go to igym.com. A massive thanks to each and every one of you who have left a rating or review on iTunes. I greatly appreciate it. And as always, if you enjoy this episode with Dr. Cheryl Calder, or any others for that matter, please share it with someone you know who could maybe benefit from it. All right, guys, enough from me. Let's get into this one. This is Dr. Cheryl Calder. Dr. Cheryl Calder, welcome to the Champion Minded podcast.
Thank you. Cool chatting to you.
Now, we both have something in common. We were both brought up in South Africa. We both played international sports for South Africa, and also during the isolation years as well. I think my first international race was probably 89, 90, just before the change came in. But tell us a little bit about your playing career and the experiences you had as an athlete.
Yeah, so I was caught up in the whole isolation thing, and while I was playing, we had a few rebel tours and those kind of stuff, went on in the early days in South Africa. But I always had this unbelievable yearning to measure myself against other players in the world. If I think about what I did today, I think it's crazy, but anyway, it was all part of what I did. And I just contacted people in Europe and said, I got a name from someone, and they gave me this name, and I said, can I come to your country and come play hockey? And the first country I did that in was actually Germany. And then the next country I did it in, I was going to go to another country, and when they heard I'm from South Africa, they said, no, you're not coming anymore. And I had this number of a guy in Holland, and I said, can I come and play at your club? And he said, no, you can't play, but you can come. And I actually spent a whole season standing on the side of the fence watching his team train and play. And I remember a week or two before I left, he said, would you like to join in a little mini game? And I said, I would love to. And they said, oh, actually, she can play hockey. So they actually invited me back to play for them the following year. So I spent a whole season. I was happy enough just to stand there and learn and see what they were doing. So I did that for 5 seasons. So from my season into the off season, and I went and played in Europe. I had to play anonymously. I wasn't allowed to go in certain areas. I wasn't allowed to walk on certain fields, and it didn't bother me because all I wanted to do was learn and measure myself. And that's kind of where it all started. And then we got back into international sport. I came straight back to South Africa, and we started playing international sport. And
when was that? Was it about 90? Was that about 92, 91, 92?
Yeah. And anyway, wherever I played, even in the isolation years, players used to say to me, how did you do that? How did you see that? And I'm like, I'm sure you see what I see. I just presumed that. And then we got into international, and coaches I played against, and countries and people and so on there, and the same comments. Then I thought, well, maybe I do see different. And then I got this email from a guy who used to watch some club hockey that I played in England and watched when I played against GB in England and so on, because his daughter played for them. And he said, I just want to congratulate you on being selected for this team. And I must tell you, you're the only international hockey player I've seen that never runs on the field. And I kind of thought, well, what is that about? And then the light went on. And then I realized I do see different. I do things differently. And then started exploring, and actually stopped playing international hockey because I've kind of been there, done that. I'd experienced what I wanted to experience. I would have loved to have played in Olympic Games, but it's the one thing I always wanted to do, which I never did. But I was cool with that, and then decided, okay, let me do my research, because I think there's a certain way you can train. And if you train in that way, you can have this concept of right time, right place, time on the ball, don't run, look as if you don't run. Believe me, I ran like crazy. I mean, especially early days of coming out of isolation, we hadn't played against any other opponents. So I did run like crazy, but the concept of how I did things. And at the end of the day, I realized it's how I see and process information and put it over into a skill. And then I wanted to know how I did that. And I approached a guy called Professor Tim Noakes at the University of Cape Town. And I said that this is what I think. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about, but if you tell me what you think and teach me what you know, I'll help you research, and we'll complete your study. And I started my PhD with Tim on a long journey, to show that if you train your eyes and your brain and your body in a certain way, you can impact performance. And that's really where it all started. So it's quite a journey.
Incredibly interesting. Obviously, Professor Tim Noakes is world renowned for all his research. And obviously, for me, most famous was the days growing up watching the Comrades Marathon, and obviously Professor Noakes being on there giving the scientific side of everything, and the heat and the hydration for some of our listeners out there. Comrades Marathon is probably the most famous sports annual sports event in South Africa, which goes back many years. It's a race that's 89 kilometers, I think it is, between Durban and Pietermaritzburg. So amazing race. But would you say where you are today, obviously working with some of the best athletes and best teams in the world, being an eye specialist or a visual performance coach, would you say the fact that you played at a very high level has helped you understand what athletes see and given you a better, if I can say the word, view of everything?
Yeah, I know there's quite a lot of talk about that, and talking about coaches who played at that level and who didn't. I think you get equally good coaches, but I have no doubt. I know what it takes. I know what's expected of you. I know what it takes to try and be the best, and it's just a knowledge which, if you don't have it, I don't think it's a necessity, but I think it's an advantage having that information. So I think it was a big role in the work that I did.
Now, obviously, you work with, as I mentioned, there are a lot of teams, a lot of coaches. Did you perhaps go into coaching yourself after playing?
Yeah, I'm actually a coach at heart. That's really what I do. So when I was a young player in my really early days, all the teams I played in, I actually did a lot of coaching, and a lot of my second half of my playing career, I was a player coach, and I think that also has a huge role to play in how you see things and perceive them, and how you need to make decisions based on that information. And I think it has a role to play in the work that I do.
Now, obviously, you work with all levels, of course, but we're just going to touch on some of the well-known teams you've worked with, like Pakistan cricket, the All Blacks, Australian rugby, and many more. So you going into those environments, and obviously, working with that level and those type of coaches there, it's very hard to convince them to change something or to look at something, because they're very, very protective of what they know and what they do. How do you approach that when you walk into, for example, and it must be very daunting, the All Blacks for the first day? Tell us what happens there.
No, I mean, you can imagine. I was really I completed my international playing career. I was a young scientist. I was proposing something that no one had ever done before. I was still in the process of completing my PhD. And, I remember leaving. I could only fly out of Johannesburg, and I had to get to Johannesburg and fly to Australia first. And from there, I could only get to New Zealand. And I remember I just wished I could just pick up the phone and call someone and say, what do you think I should be doing? I'm going to work with All Blacks. And, Alistair, you would know, as young kids, we used to, I did wake up early in the morning and watch the Springboks play the All Blacks, 4 o'clock in the morning or something. So for me, it was quite daunting. The nice thing about what I did, I believed in what I did. I proved it in as I played, and I proved it in science. So I had that base to work from, but believe me, it was daunting. But I remember my first trip to go work with the All Blacks. I landed in Sydney, and I had about a 5-hour wait. And I walked into a bookshop, and I saw this book which said, "Don't die with the music in you." It's a book written by Wayne Bennett. So I love what he did and how he worked.
All Black legend.
Yes, it was such an inspiration for me. And I thought that if I had enough money at that time, when I came back, I would buy the book at Sydney Airport. But it's really what my work's about. It's about having this knowledge of something that I'm not sure everyone knows about, and that I shouldn't die with the music in me. And that's how I was inspired to go to the All Blacks and just get there and teach them what I know, and etc. So that's really, that's where it started. But a very daunting task for me as a young South African scientist and a woman, in this really environment unknown to me. Yeah, so, but great, I believed in what I did. I knew it worked, and I was there to make you better. And that's really what it was about.
I'm sure, especially back then as well, obviously South Africa was the number one enemy of All Blacks rugby. Like you just mentioned there, you'd get up at 4 a.m. to watch tests from Eden Park and all those amazing places. And I finally actually got to visit Eden Park, I think 3 or 4 years ago, which was like a boyhood dream for me to know what this place really looked like, because we'd only see it on TV. But I'm sure you must have got some stick from the Kiwis being South African and maybe being a spy in the camp or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think those days, they were apprehensive about me. I knew that anyway. It didn't matter to me. It didn't matter to me. And my bigger mission was to make them better players. Really, when that came through for me was when I worked for England in the World Cup in Australia, England rugby. I actually went through those 8-9 weeks of that World Cup never opening my mouth, because if I spoke, English people would say, "Oh no, don't trust her, she's a traitor." And if South Africans heard me speak, they say, like, "What are you doing with England? You're a traitor." And I spent that whole time like just keeping my mouth shut because I was working for the enemy, kind of,
Yeah. It must have been interesting, and I'm sure it's one of the questions you get all the time is, how do you work with all these other teams, etc. But I mean, I'm in the same position as you. I work with opposition teams and so on and so forth. It's obviously how professional you are. But something that strikes me about you, Dr. Calder, is you're very confident. You're very sure in the work that you do, and I'm sure that's an important ingredient when you're trying to convince people of, especially back in the 90s, for example, before internet and having Google and evidence and all those things, to convince them that this really worked.
Yeah. So for me, it's my confidence isn't a false confidence. It's I've done the work. I've proven it as a player. I've proven it in research. I've proven it with the people I've worked with. So it's really a founded confidence. I definitely wouldn't have the confidence if it didn't work for me, and it didn't work in research, and it didn't work with the players I've dealt with. So it's really based on my experience and what I've learned.
Yeah, no, it's a key lesson in life as well. If you don't believe in yourself and you don't believe in what you do, then why should others? They'll be skeptical, and obviously they won't buy into it. Let's shift gears here a little bit. Excuse the pun. And you've worked with Formula One, which is one of my favorite sports. I watch every Grand Prix. I watch every qualifier. You worked with obviously Valtteri Bottas, one of the Mercedes drivers at the moment. Give us a little bit of insight into what you would do with Valtteri, for example.
Yeah, the interesting fact about my work is that it's really down to the individual. And I believe that every individual has the strengths and weaknesses in their system, in their visual motor system, decision-making system. And we just presume that if we are elite athletes, we're good at everything. And I've shown that you actually aren't. So what I've found over the years and during my playing career as well is that the elite athlete is actually a master at hiding the stuff he's not good at, mm-hmm. and being really better at the stuff that he's good at. So you would get away with that most times. But I believe in a World Cup or a final of a competition or something, there comes a time when you actually have to use the skill that you're not good at. And if you're not good at that, it might be one decision that loses a World Cup. It might be one decision that loses a Wimbledon final, or etc. Or one shot. So I learned very quickly that we all have these weaknesses and strengths. And when I work with, for example, a Formula One driver, I assess them and I find out what are they good at and what are they not so good at. And it's not something you don't have. It's something that you're not good at. And I mean, with some of the Formula One drivers I've worked with, I've picked up, there's a skill which is really important, which I call visual recognition. And it's the ability to pick up information really early. And I believe the earlier you pick up and process that information, the more time you have on the ball, the more time you have to execute or whatever. And the interesting thing is when I talk to Bottas, I always ask him, how does iGym impact the work that he does, his sport? And he always says, when I get in the car, it seems like everything is slow motion. And it's that concept. And I believe that if you pick up the information early, which is a trainable skill, it's not something that you're born with, it's a trainable skill that you can impact performance. So really interesting, even though we know that some of these guys are the best at what they do in the world, they still have weaknesses in their system, which I can make better. And I also believe that the stuff they're good at, I can even make better. Yeah. So I just make sure the athlete or the individual or the sportsman or whatever is better at what he does.
I mean, you can just obviously imagine. I mean, these guys are driving 330 kilometers per hour down a straight, especially, last week was Baku, and they have the fastest straight. It's 1.5 miles, and they get up to 335 kilometers per hour, which is just insane. I mean, things are coming at you pretty quick at that speed. So, I mean, obviously, reaction is one of the most important things in a sport like that. And in fact, in any sport, reaction and anticipation is one of the most important things. So would you spend a lot of time working on reaction things as well? Would you have drills for those type of things?
Yeah, I do. So if you do a iGym, if you do 10 minutes in the iGym, and now the iGym is a training program, a gym program for the eyes and the brain and the motor skills. If you do 10 minutes of iGym, and I've designed it in such a way, and I've learned from individuals and players and coaches and so on, and everything I've learned over 30 years I've put into that program. But if you do 10 minutes of iGym, you would make about 500 decisions based on something you haven't seen before. And for me, the difference is not being good at the things you normally do, but it's being good at the things you don't normally do. So it's really about being able to respond to the unexpected. That's really where it changes. You know, can I see and process that information quick enough to make a decision for something that I haven't seen before? The regular stuff I do, we become good at. You know, it becomes automated eventually. I do it without seeing or thinking, if you have to call it that. But it's not that. It's the other stuff. And I believe I train not only the normal stuff, but that unexpected that happens. And can you then make a decision based on that? So
now, at the beginning, we obviously spoke about your playing career as well, and you spoke about the ability to see things that other players didn't see, and you were able to, you know, you speak about is it spatial awareness or where you're seeing space?
Yeah.
Now, if we look at the greats in sport, Johan Cruyff in soccer, for example, Wayne Gretzky in ice hockey. These were athletes who had an ability to see spaces that others didn't see. Lionel Messi is someone who's in a space. Steve Nash, basketball. These are exceptional athletes that saw something quicker than other players did. They saw spaces. I think it was Cruyff who said, you know, a great footballer doesn't have the ball. A great footballer is in the right space, is in the right place at the right time, for example. And Gretzky was that as well. Is part of that a natural talent that those athletes had, for example, or have? Or would they train that?
I think as I've worked with different athletes all over the world, I've really come across an absolute handful of players that I think, well, this is exceptional. And I would quiz them, I'd ask them questions, etc. And I've discovered that I believe it's by the nature of how you grow up and things that you do and games that you play and, you know, things you do as a kid, and you develop these skills. So that's what's exciting about my work. I think I've tried to simulate these kind of skills and put them in a training program so that that you can train them. Doesn't matter what age you are. You know, you can be a young kid and you can be an old guy. I mean, we had an old guy of 96 the other day who wanted to pass his driver's license, and he needed to improve his reaction time. You know, so we believe it's trainable.
We could do with you here in Florida, Dr. Calder. The driving here is ridiculous.
I've been there. I've worked with Ernie in Jupiter.
Just up the road from me. Yeah,
just up the road. So I've spent quite a lot of time there, but it's trainable. So I think it's developed. I think you know, I remember I used to go with my dad every Saturday and go watch hockey, you know, as a young kid. And I think you learn stuff and see stuff and you gain experience, but you still need the ability to be able to do it, to execute it. And I think that it's a very trainable skill. And I know for myself, I did things as a kid that other people didn't do. So I think even simple stuff like getting on a wall and falling off and realizing that I need to put my foot in another place, you know, or climbing a tree and thinking, if I put my hand here, I'm not going to slip, or, you know, whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's learning and falling and, you know, getting hurt and learning this is what I should be doing and fine-tuning that ability. And there are lots of other ways you can do it. So I'm a great fan of kids playing outside and, you know, getting off digital devices and just experiencing the outdoors.
Yeah.
And I think you develop skills by doing that, because the eyes were actually never designed to look close. They were designed to hunt for food and do those kind of stuff. So we don't use the eyes in that kind of way anymore. And I think the great sportsmen, if you go back into their histories, you'll find that they did stuff like that.
Obviously, just listening to this, you talk about a whole lot, developing a whole lot of skills. For example, you must be a big advocate of multi-sports as a child, playing a lot of sports, doing a lot of activities, as you just mentioned there, that help create these type of skills.
Absolutely, and you'll definitely veer into a certain niche at some point, because you naturally develop those skills, and then from there you develop them further. So so I'm a believer in that.
Oh, excellent. You spoke a little bit about visual awareness. Could you explain to us what that is? I mean, I think you spoke about visual awareness or visual recognition. One of them you mentioned.
Yeah. I mentioned recognition. That's ability to see something early, which gives you more time to execute. Doesn't matter what you're doing. Visual awareness is the ability to be aware of what's happening around me. And I think today, where we spend so much time on digital devices and indoors, etc., we're kind of closing down our awareness more and more, and we're busy in a small area. So we're actually training to be in here all the time, in the small area. And awareness is not only having an awareness of what's happening around me, but an awareness that I can respond to. And that's really what I train in our gym. It's all good and well having this great awareness of what's happening around me and what I can see. But if something happens, can I make a decision and respond to whatever I have to do? So it's more than awareness. It's the ability to respond to situations. And that happens not only in sport, but it happens in life. I mean, just driving your car, you have to have this awareness of what's happening around you. So I do all kinds of work. I work with a big insurance company, Discovery, and we've brought down their loss ratio in claims in the first 8 months of working with them between 20 and 25%. And all we did, we took normal people and gave them an iGym training program. And within that period, just by improving their awareness of how to use their eyes and how their eyes can actually function, we brought down the accident rate and obviously, the ratio in claims. So it works for all of us, for you and for me, and the most elite sportsmen, for young kids learning, and just for everyone.
Incredibly interesting. I think I was, I had Ben Ryan on the podcast a few episodes ago, and I know that he interviewed you as well. He's got a fantastic podcast, by the way, everybody, called the Ben Ryan podcast. He's former, former Fiji gold medal winning coach with the Olympics. So check that one out, listeners. I think you mentioned on his show that you worked with a sailing team as well. Was it in the America's Cup, or I can't quite remember, but I'm just curious to know what you would do with them.
So I work with Prada, the Prada America's Cup team. So sailing doesn't involve, like most people think, I only work with ball sports, but it's really working with the individual. And as I said in the beginning, we have these strengths and weaknesses, and it doesn't matter what you do, we can make you better than what you are. In sailing, you've got to read the water. You've got to make decisions on your feet. So there's a lot of coordination in what they do. There's a lot of decision making. I don't know if you watched any of the recent America's Cup. I mean, it was really close and really crucial decisions that you make. So, and it's all based, about 80 to 90% of decisions you make in life and in sport is based on visual. So it's the one system that we neglect, and it's the one system we don't train. We train all these other systems, but yet visual gives you 80 to 90% information, and that's what you base your decision on. And it's the one system that we don't take time to train.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Just speaking to you, your passion comes through for what you do. I mean, you're obviously doing something that you wake up and it's not a job. It's a passion for you.
Yeah, it's in my DNA. It's I think I was kind of born with it, because really from a young kid I had this incredible inquisitiveness to why do you do that? Why do you do that? And how do you judge? And it's just in what I do, and it's really exciting for me. I love what I do, and I know that I can change the performance of any individual. So it's exciting for me.
I'm very fortunate myself to also obviously be involved in the sports world, but sometimes, I just have to pinch myself, even after 25 years of being at a Wimbledon or, being at a football stadium with a team or a player, and you're thinking, I used to watch this when I was a kid. I was at Glasgow Rangers in last February, and just I can't believe I'm actually getting paid to do this. I mean, it's just amazing, but of course it takes a lot of hard work.
I think exactly the same sometimes. So I can feel for what you're saying, but Alistair, you do amazing work. I mean, I see some of your thoughts on Twitter and so on, and it is so spot on. So really, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
You just say things which definitely resonates with me. But in my experience over the 30 years of working with some of the most elite athletes, it's exactly what happens. It's exactly what happens, and keep spreading that message, because it's amazing. So keep up that good work.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I definitely follow a lot of great people such as yourself as well. So I learn from everybody, and then just, I suppose, just share it or put it out there, because everything that we know, we've seen somewhere or learned from somewhere. So
I know. But you know what's really important, that you have to be courageous enough to say what you think is important. Because I think so often people are apprehensive to say things that they're not always sure people want to hear. But I think some of the stuff you say is absolutely spot on. And I think that you must be helping tremendous amount of people out there to perform better. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. Coming from you, that's a great honor. So thank you so much. Just 2 or 3 more questions, and I'll let you go. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on to the show. One of my favorite players, and I'm just taking the advantage of this, was Brian Habana, obviously the South African rugby player. Obviously growing up in South Africa, watching the Springboks and watching those teams as well. How was it working with Brian?
Definitely one of my favorite players. I loved working with him, a great player and a really good guy. I used to, in the World Cup in 2007, I used to do something with him just before he went on the field. I'll actually send you a photo, then you can have a look. But a believer in absolutely what I did. One of the best trainers, so really took time. He spent extra time doing iGym. I did a lot of on-field stuff with him as well, and he had this energy to want to be better, and that's really what it's about, isn't it? It's do you want to be ordinary? Do you want to just do what everyone always does, or do you want to go the extra mile? And I mean, Brian Habana, not just as a person, but as a rugby player, was always prepared to just go the extra mile and make himself better. And I mean, it's a pleasure working with someone when they have that passion for their performance and for their sport and for the team they play for. So one of the greatest guys I've worked with.
Dr. Calder, what would you say is what you've seen in the difference between the good and the great? Because, you have certain standout athletes, Serena Williams, Brian Habana, and you've been around these high performance environments and these people. Is there 1 or 2 things that stick out for you on athletes like this?
I think, sure, there's really lots, but if I have to maybe mention one thing, it's the recognition that you're not good at everything, and that you need to take those specific skills and make them better. The good guy, I call them great, but the good guys are happy to know that they're good at stuff and keep doing and making stuff better. But these guys realize they do have little weaknesses in their game, and that they need to find ways of making them better. And that's what gives them the edge. As I said, it's that one decision that makes a difference. I always remember the intercept that Brian Habana did in the semi-final against Argentina. And if you watch that YouTube video clip, you'll see that slow-mo kind of more time to do what he did. And I knew that when he intercepted that ball and scored, that South Africa going to win the World Cup, because it immediately you put pressure on the opponents, because this player's got this X factor that, you know, what is he going to do next, etc. And I mean, watch the clip and you'll understand what I'm talking about. So it's just the passion and the hard work to go out there and find things that you can make yourself better at. Because again, I state the best players in the world aren't good at everything. They definitely have weaknesses, and if you can identify what they are, you can be unbeatable.
So I suppose it's a little bit to do with vulnerability as well, of admitting that you're not good at something, even if you're at the highest level, for example. So one of the tennis players I had the privilege to work with between 2014 and 2018 was our very own Kevin Anderson. Kevin lives down the road here as well in West Palm Beach. Now, obviously, you look at a sport like tennis where I've watched years and years of movement. That was my field previously, that I would work with athletes, and obviously breaking down the movement of athletes. And, you know, we look at players such as Caroline Wozniacki, who was a former world number one, and people would say, what makes her so good? Because she doesn't have a weapon. She doesn't have a big serve, or she doesn't get free points. And it was her ability to see where the ball was coming way before it was hit. And for me, that's, you know, she was the best mover because she was always there. She would see the ball before it was struck, for example. Now, those visual cues they pick up from, I don't know how far it is away, maybe 20, 22 meters. I don't know how long a tennis court is, but they're able to read a serve due to certain movements in the body, their hips, their shoulders, all these things. Is that something, you know, that you work on as well, in terms of that you're looking for those cues?
No, absolutely. So really important, but I still believe that you need to equip the individual to be able to have the ability to look for those cues. So if my ability to find that cue is too slow, then the player's already executed something and then I'm only trying to respond. Or if I'm trying to track the ball, or if I'm trying to pick up a cue off the racket or whatever, if I don't have the visual ability to do that, then I'm never going to do it. Then I depend. Then you get. Let me give you. Can I give you a field hockey example?
Sure.
So I worked with Spanish hockey in 2004 Olympics, and there were two players in the team. The one, they were goalkeepers. The one had ability to judge, say, a 3-on-2, 3-on-1 situation, 2-on-1 situation quite easily. His judgment skills were really good. So he knew when to close down and get out and so on. The other guy wasn't good at that. But what he did, he developed his game to stay back, and he developed his reactions really well. So we had these two goalkeepers, one who could close down a situation and one who used to remain back and had these most amazing reactions. But I still, as I said earlier, I still believe there comes a time where the guy with a good judgment needs to react quickly, and the guy with the good reactions needs to close down a player or something. So what we do, we just get better and better and better at the skill that we're good at. And until someone recognizes, hey, there's something I can make you better at, and you give him the physical ability to get better at that, then he can train it. But if no one ever picks up that cue, and I would imagine a player like Wozniacki wasn't the strongest player, was she? So she needed to find other ways of making herself good, and maybe this is how she developed the game. And we all do that as people. We develop things around us by the nature of what we're good at. But I still want to make the stuff you're not good at better. So that's that I believe that's where the edge comes in. And the same with Brian Habana. There were definite skills that I picked up that he wasn't good at. And we just worked on that over a period of time. So I spent 3 years working with Springboks in the build-up to that World Cup full-time. So we were able to make Brian Habana as good as he can be at, in that final that he played in.
Oh, fascinating. I could keep you on another hour, but I'm not going to. I'm going to be respectful of your time. Quickly, just to finish off, a little bit about iGym. It's the website is what's the website for the iGym?
iGym.com.
Simple. igym.com. Can anybody, it doesn't matter what level you are, because there's going to be a lot of listeners on here who, maybe have kids, young kids who play sports, maybe want to improve the visual. Is it available to anybody?
It's available to everyone. Initially, it was only for the elite athletes we dealt with. It was only for people we dealt with. And again, I say we work through the board with young kids, we even work with stroke patients, we work with drivers, we work with everyday people, we work with the most elite athletes in the world. So we got so many requests, can we do it, that we have now programs for everyone in the world that they can just go on and subscribe to it. So initially what was only available for our most elite athletes is now available to everyone. And the exciting thing which we picked up about the young kids is we found that we had young kids going on, their parents wanted to play better, and we improved their sporting ability. And then at the same time, the parents used to come back and say, you know what, my kids are learning better. They're reading better because the eyes are moving better. The brain is being trained, so they're comprehending better and better academic results. So the offshoot is not only for sport, but it's for, just improving your learning academic ability as well. So there's numerous ways that our gym helps us as individuals.
Awesome. Excellent stuff. It's really been a pleasure having you on. You're on Twitter as well, just in case our listeners want to follow you. What's your Twitter handle?
At Cheryl Calder.
Again, sorry?
At Cheryl Calder.
Simple as well. Yep. I like it. You keep things simple.
Yeah, it's the easiest way to do things.
All right, awesome stuff. Thank you so much for coming on to the show, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the year.
Thank you, Alistair. Really privileged talking to you and talking to all the people out there. Thank you.
Well, there you have it, guys. Wow, I really enjoyed chatting with Dr. Cheryl Calder. Incredibly interesting, just a visionary, a pioneer in her field as a visual performance coach. As always, this podcast is available on iTunes, Amazon Podcast, YouTube, and via my website, alistairmccaw.com. Connect with me on social media. I'm on Twitter at Alistair McCaw, on Facebook, Alistair McCaw page, and on Instagram, Be Champion Minded. Until next time, remember you were made for greatness. Now go do the work. Stay champion minded.